Alright, it's been over a week now. I've let season 2 sit in, and I've come up with my list of all 18 episodes of Arcane ranked from the very bottom to the very top. This is a show that has been getting pretty universal praise all around as its 2 seasons, its whole series, finally finished up just a week and a half ago. And as somebody who has given a lot of positive about the series, who's given a pretty negative view on the series, I think it was just interesting to go back and really reflect on all the different episodes in Arcane and just rank them here from 18 to 1 and really see where I felt season 1 outperformed and outshone season 2, but what parts of season 2 do I think outperformed and looked really good and can compare to season 1? To sit here, we're going to go through 18 to 1, my Arcane episode rankings. So, starting off with Season 2, Episode 2, my number 18th ranked episode is Watch It All Burn. This episode, to me, has some critical failures, but what it does very well is highlight where Jinx's headspace is post-Silco, post blowing up the council, and the opening monologue that she kind of has with Silco that, mirrors episode 3 in season 1 of Silco's monologue to Vander, I thought was very well done. It's a very solid tone for the episode and really made me intrigued to see where Jinx was at coming in. Unfortunately, this is one of the many cases of season 2 where we then go into a music video type prologue that kind of explains what's going on with the Chem Barons, but these Chem Barons, who really have only shown up in season 1, episode 7, are so poorly and underly written, outside of the ones that have already perished, Silco, Remy, and Finn, that you're left kind of in a void this episode following Smeech around, who is just a character that's going to end up dying at the end of the episode. I don't think this episode really goes too deep into what's going on with Jinx in her mind, and when you look at what else takes place this episode, it's just a little bit lackluster throughout. The other main storyline in this episode is Victor coming out of his cocoon, and another big slight and the reason why I'm having this at number 18, and this is a classic Arcane kind of rushing things, is the interaction between Jace and Victor lasts a couple minutes, and Victor's just like, "Goodbye, Jace." And Jace is just sitting there doing nothing to stop. He's not questioning it. There's no rush of what's wrong with him. There's no going after Victor. He's just like, oh, Victor's gone. It makes very little sense for me in terms of good writing for Jace and Victor. And even though that might have picked up towards the end of the season, this definitely, episode 2, season 2, was not a great startup overall. We had the interesting scene with the enforcers using the toxic gas, while Jinx was making Zavika her new arm. That was interesting and really helped highlight Caitlyn's descent into being manipulated by Mbessa. But overall, this episode just didn't have much else going on. We didn't flush out any of the new characters outside of Smeech, who, again, died at the end of this episode. We didn't get anything else about the Enforcer group besides that one scene. And I felt like Jinx, outside of that opening monologue, was a little bit of a step back in terms of where her character ended in season 1. It's just an episode that I think loses a little bit of focus. The Victor stuff towards the end, as we see him healing and you see kind of the mission Victor's starting on, is very interesting and probably the highlight of the episode. But the interaction with Jace and just the big focus on Smeech throughout made this one of the more, put it bluntly, this made this what I felt was Arcane's worst episode of all 18. Number 17 is Blisters and Bedrock, Season 2, Episode 5. I can already feel the heat from all my friends that say they love this episode. I have friends saying they cried during it, but for me, Blisters and Bedrock just really did not work for me at many levels. And if I'm going to talk about why it's so low, it's the flashback scene that we see of Mander, Silco, and Jinx and Vi's mother in the last drop. And even though I do think this tugs at emotional heartstrings, and I think people do enjoy that, but for me, this felt like the writers trying to have their cake and eating it too, while also making another cake and eating it at the same time. It is something that I think really makes the first season make less sense, and especially the characters of Vander and Silco in some ways, especially Silco, to where it makes him almost fully irredeemable and makes no plausible sense also for Vander of like, we know Violet and Powder in the beginning, kind of, from a little bit of flashbacks we had in season 1, and you even saw it here in season 2, we're like at the bottom of the barrel for Zahn and the Undercity, to where they were living in the poorest parts. They were living in kind of the very bottom of the fissures. So to know that Vander was part of the last drop, running the last drop, know that Silco was her friend, and they were both friends when they were, when she was going to be having Violet, and knowing that Violet and Powder lived in those conditions, kills, I think, for me, the whole entire feel of Vander finding them at the beginning of the first episode. I can understand maybe him understanding who their parents were, but the fact that they were acting like some big triple cohort team working together, I think takes away some of the beauty of the first season. And then Silco, it just makes no sense for him, because if he knows, again, by Violet, he knows all of that coming from this scene, it makes no sense that he's looking to turn Violet into a weapon, that he isn't really telling Jinx about, her mother and stuff, and using that to manipulate her even more emotionally onto his side. It just does not make sense in the overall scope of Arcane, and it's why this episode, for me especially, is all the way down at 17. Now, there's obviously Mel's storyline with the Black Rose and her discovering that, no, the Black Rose does not have Kino, her brother. It's a disguise that's trying to get information out of Mel. And we see her mage self kind of awaken, but those scenes, again, didn't feel that great. They felt kind of flat, and they didn't work as much for me. You have Vi coming off this emotional gruel betrayal from Caitlyn, and we get, a music video highlight of the fighting pits, but there's nothing else being, made there, and, she is accepting following Jinx around. Jinx, who she knows has killed people, who you can pinpoint as the reason why the, Undercity is doing terrible right now. And it just doesn't make sense for her to forgive Jinx in this way, and that character shift for her. Again, you see her so deep and dark, but you don't get a sense of her changing into her more normal self. She just gets written as being her more normal self. She gets to see the effect Powder has had on the Undercity as a figure, but the whole series does not care about that at all for the most part, and not looking to accept that. And it's really just there to try and build up the relationship of Jinx and Vi, which, again, I think that relationship was so broken and understandably broken from the first season that it, again, felt like the writers trying to have some cake and eating it too. I know a lot of people like this shift from Jinx maybe becoming more of a neutral character, especially with the likes of Isha being her anchor feeling, but I do think rewatching, the end of season 1 and seeing how that ended and where Jinx was in season 2, the character journey and arc does not make much sense. And I think Blisters and Bedrock is a perfect example of an episode where the characters are just jumping all over the place way too much. Now, it does end on a high note with Jace coming back from the anomaly and killing, Victor here, Sallow, and that scene itself just works so well as you see that Sallow can be controlled by Victor, which for me is the biggest sign in the world, Victor not good, Victor bad, but there's a lot of people out there who still were on Team Victor despite all the glaring red signs of hive mind and feeling. That doesn't really work well when it comes to progress and evolution over time. So that's why Blisters and Bedrock is all the way at number 17 for me. Number 16 is Season 2, Episode 8, Killing is a Cycle. This episode, again, I felt had some positives, but the speed running of certain characters and their motivational arcs was heavily, for me, damaged here. Victor being in the cocoon shell and eventually transforming into his glorious evolutionary self, his final boss figure. I just did not think we got there enough with Victor and his motivations to accept such a violent transition, a violent maneuvering to where he feels like this is the necessary path. It just, the writing and the time wasn't well there to let that breathe. I thought the, emotional talk with Jinx and Caitlyn, and eventually Jinx and Vi, was decently well done, but Jinx pretty much tells Vi, I'm going to go kill myself, and locks Vi into this jail cell. And Vi's, response to, Caitlyn was like, we're going to get back together and have sex in this jail cell where I know my sister just said she's going to commit suicide. There's no intent to go after her sister. There's no intent, to try and find her and help her. I appreciate and Caitlyn and Vi's relationship and the representation that means in media and stuff is very positive and valid, and one of the things I wish they were able to handle better in season 2. But again, this episode should have been like almost a 2-3 episode type situation instead of filling everything in there. You have Mel reuniting with with both Jace and reuniting with Mbessa, trying to stop this war from happening, and Bessa just going on this, hell path, convinced that she can use Victor as her new weapon. Again, stuff that works kind of well, but it just feels like these conversations, these payoffs, should go a little bit more than just what they were. Killing is a cycle, I think, is a make or break for you overall for Arcane Season 2. If this is one of your highest ranked episodes of the series, you're very much enjoying Season 2 and find that Season 2 was as good, if not superior, to Season 1. If you're like me and you have Killing as a cycle near your bottom of your episode rankings, I think that means that you felt that Season 2 was very rushed, was very flawed, and you questioned some of the motives of characters and where the story is going and stuff like that. And when I break down, that's why it's my 16th ranked episode of the series. Not terrible, don't get me wrong, but definitely I do see the speedrunning of Victor. I see the speedrunning of Kate and Vi's relationship. I see the speedrunning of Mel's whole arc and relationship. The only one I would say was done very well here was Jace. And his arc over the whole Season 2 was done pretty decently, per se, outside of just accepting that Victor was going to leave in Episode 2, which we talked about already earlier this video. Number 15. Everyone wants to be my enemy. Kate Vi stands are going to probably think I hate this relationship because this is the cupcake episode. But when I went back and I was rewatching Season 1, this is the weakest episode in Season 1 for me. And why is that? Even though I think it starts off very well with the young Caitlyn backstory, and you get the baptism scene with Silco and Jinx, and you really get the initial dynamic between Vi and Caitlyn, I just feel like this is the one that just lacks the most, interest there. Jace and Mel become romantically involved like that, and I don't think their chemistry was being built that way at all. The Victor arc in this story I thought was pretty well decent, but this is the beginning of him discovering what the Hex Core is and what the power it's going to do. And then the fight with Vi and Savika was very, very well done and very well, gone overall. But visually seeing like Vi going back to the Undercity for the first time. But this episode, I do think lacks a little bit. The Marcus side of stuff, a little bit weaker with Silco. I think the Powder side of it works okay with Silco, but it's not fleshed out enough. The Kate and Vi stuff, I think, is good groundwork. But I do think it's not as good as what we think. I think we just like the idea of her saying, hey, you're hot cupcake as the highlight anchor of this episode. But when you look around what else is going on, this episode doesn't have too much to offer in terms of high's high. Now, it's not an episode trying to be the high of high. It's a very basic foundational episode. It's trying to build the foundation for a Caitlyn-Vi relationship, a partnership per se. It's really showing you the bond between Silco and Jinx this episode, as well as show you, the diverging paths of Jace and Victor. But this is one of those episodes that does that basic stuff well, but it doesn't go really beyond that, in my personal opinion. You have the opera scene where Jace gets corrupted. I just think a lot of this stuff is very rudimentary, very basic. It's done well, but when you compare it to all the other episodes of Arcane that I think do things exceptional and have very, I think, daring and exceptional story choices, this is why Everyone Wants to Be My Enemy is a slow. Plus, it was a music video part of the episode with Imagine Dragons, and one of my biggest critiques of Arcane is they just try being a music video way too often. Number 14, Oil and Water, Season 1, Episode 8. This is another episode where I do think there's a lot of positives for. The introduction of Mbessa, whether it's in, Mel's opening, nightmare scene, or just Mbessa just manipulating Jace throughout. She clearly comes out as a character out the bat and becomes one of the strongest characters of the series by far. And it's a great example of what good writing for good characters are like in this show, and you can use that as a foil to some of the poorly written characters in season 2. And Mbessa in 2 episodes leaves a gigantic mark, and she is by far the highlight for me of Oil and Water. You have the side storyline of Kate and Vi trying to get the council on their side, but they're kind of going their separate ways for the first time. Vi wanting to be more physical, Kate kind of just being a little bit, not sure what she can do, not sure of herself just yet. And it's definitely one of those, story elements that I just don't think work very much. We get more about Finn, hinting that maybe it's time to get rid of Silco, but that's not too much in there overall. Silco is... What is he doing in this episode? He goes to get Jinx healed by the doctor, and that provided some very powerful visuals and seeing kind of where Jinx is going mad. And again, when you watch this episode going into season 2, it feels like Jinx becomes a whole separate character between the 2 seasons that wasn't written out well enough for me personally. But yeah, and then it has the big fight scene at the end. And the action scene was one of the best action scenes of Season 1. Probably the highlight action scene of Season 1, outside of maybe the Savika Vi fight we'll talk about later. But it just doesn't go much on beyond that. Again, a lot of these middle episodes, every episode I've listed so far has been a middle episode of the season. It's just, for me, isn't reaching out and going the highs of highs. I do appreciate and recognize the amazing work they did with Mbessa in just 1 episode, but it definitely highlights to me some of the weaknesses that we see in other episodes with characters that get kind of left doing nothing. Speaking of characters that you get left doing nothing, number 13, Heavy is the Crown, Season 2, Episode 1. This was a tough one to place because there's a lot of positives in some ways. When you think about Heavy is the Crown, you have that great action scene at the very end and the memorial, and it works so well, and the animation is so well done, and there's a lot of setup here happening. This is the first time you're really seeing Caitlyn and Vi's relationship be tested, and Caitlyn maybe getting a little bit, after the death of her mother, getting a little bit more on the aggressive side, on the upset side, wanting to maybe get, easily be manipulated by Mbessa later on. We get introduced to some characters, Steb, Loris, and Maddie, and really only Maddie is the character that is given any type of, interesting story throughout the season. But even then, she's kind of a throwaway character outside of a wild turn in the finale. I just end up not liking this episode as much just because I feel like a lot of the things that built up in this episode, whether it be, Jace coming to terms with what happened and trying to figure out how he was saved, Victor getting into the cocoon, Caitlyn and Vi's relationship being kind of tense, Vi agreeing to put on the suit. Given that we didn't get that much of a follow-up of the Strike Force unit, I feel this episode just sank very hard for me. I appreciate Remy's whole attack at the action scene and Mbessa setting up that all up, but I do think the episode is tipping its hand off that Mbessa's controlling all of this a little bit too much to make it, I think, obvious for somebody watching it through. And again, because characters like Maddie, because characters like Loris, who seemingly like they should be fleshed out better characters. I mean, even Milo and Clagger in episode 1, season 1, was given more character, dialogue, character growth, and interesting individuals than any of these 3 new characters were given throughout the season. And because they were such a focus in episode 1, and they basically became nobodies outside of Maddie, I know people will argue Loris, but I think he was a throwaway character too that I could care nothing about. I just think Heavy as the Crown falls pretty hard, and that's why it's at my number 13 spot here on my top 18 rankings. I'm being very hard on season 2, and it's not going to stop because number 12 is The Dirt Under Your Nails. Highlights of this episode. Obviously, the ending, dialogue and the ending relationship with both Jace and Victor, as well as the beginning dialogue and relationship between like Echo and Jinx. Mwah. So well done. Caitlyn and Vine, how they end up, again, so well done. And there's a lot of things that I think can work in this finale, but it's one of these that I just do think was speedrunning a bit, and I'm not a fan of faceless zombie-type creatures in any type of medium, and I do feel like Victor being built up as this ultimate big bad threat was a little bit too speedrun for my liking. I thought it just provided a little bit lack of action and clarity in some ways, and there's a lot of characters' deaths in here that happened, like Loris, for instance, that I did not care about because the characters weren't built up well. The Dirt Under Your Nails, just for me, hits a lot of just areas where I just don't think it worked well because I thought the Mbessa Mel side stuff, Mbessa Kate side stuff felt a little bit rushed and out of place. It felt like we're trying to wrap that up as much as we can. And in this season, I felt that the Warwick and Jinx, potential death. I mean, nobody thinks Jinx is dead. Again, that was fine, but I didn't find that great. We got a really cool scene with Echo and his his drive that lets him go back through time. But I wish that almost went on a little bit more. I could have used 1 or 2 more scenes there for that to happen. But I think it worked decently well. But this is just an episode where it had a lot of positives. The action was great. There's a lot of good character moments throughout. But it definitely just felt like the season was rushed. And like the whole side of Mbessa, Noxus, and Victor didn't quite make the most sense to me, wasn't the most well fleshed out. And when you think about stuff like, man, Jace is telling everybody in that council room he needs to shut down the Hex Gates. Why are we in the middle of the battle and Jace finally going to do that? Why couldn't he do that way before this battle had taken place? It just has a lot of plot holes. And, I know a lot of people are left satisfied with this, and I'm less satisfied with a lot of different ways. It being ranked 12 out of 18 isn't a sign that this is a terrible episode, just that Arcane had a lot of amazing, great episodes, and this one was simply put, just good. You get the Swain, Noxus hints at the end of the episode with the Raven. But, yeah, we'll see where this goes moving forward with Arcane, but I was definitely let down by the finale, not because it wasn't good, because I had high expectations given how good season 1 was, and that's why The Dirt Under Your Nails is only ranked number 12 for me. I just thought some of the things were a little bit too speedrunny, and it felt a little bit too sky beamy in the middle of the fight, which I'm never the biggest fan of when it comes to end story plots. So, number 11, Some mysteries are better left unsolved. This is an episode that really, on my rewatch, jumped up from near the bottom for me because of a lot of different things. One, it introduces us to the Piltover side of things. People like Heimerdinger, people like young Caitlin, people obviously like Jace and Victor and Mel. And there's so much being built and so much interest and so much character work being done here to get you engaged in a whole other side story with Victor, with Jace, even with people like Mel and Heimerdinger, that this really does a great job taking off the story. All while, I think, providing some fun little details still going on with the side of Vi, Powder, and crew. You have that dramatic scene where Powder's trying to hide. You have Vi having the heart-to-heart with Vander and deciding that she's going to try turning herself in. It just has really great dialogue and really slow moments throughout that really allow these characters to continue to be built up so well that when they do eventually take off later in the series, it's all because of the great foundational work of Season 1, Episode 2, Some Mysteries Are Better Left Unsolved. This is really the first time outside of the initial look at Soko do we start seeing some things with Soko happening, not just with his lab, but with his motivations in a little different type of a way. I just think this episode is very much underappreciated because all of the character building it did here, again, you hear this in Season 2, Episode 2, the character building Season 1 did in the second episode was significantly better than any of the character building that you saw through Season 2 of Arcane, of anybody new outside of maybe Mbessa, but at that point, I think most of Mbessa's stuff was built in the final 2 episodes of Season 1. I have this at number 11. It's just outside my top 10, but it's one I do appreciate more and more as time goes on. It's a fantastic episode that really gets you bought into Jace, Victor, and really involved in their character storyline because it becomes a very important character storyline throughout the whole entire series. Top 10 time, and number 10 for me is Paint the Town Blue, Season 2, Episode 4. This episode, to me, is highlighting just Jinx coming to the realization of what power and effect she has over people. You know, her wanting not to be involved in that can kind of make sense for me. She has this new emotional anchor of Isha, very much the little sister she never had. She doesn't want to get too involved back in any of the stuff above. She's kind of shutting it out. But eventually, you know, when Isha gets taken, she does not deny herself that opportunity to become the Undercity savior. And you really did see it here. And I wish we got more of this storyline and more of this face of Jinx all throughout the series, but it kind of got let go after this episode. But the scene in the jail cell of everybody putting their hand on her shoulder, so emotionally moving. And just the focus it has on Jinx this episode was very well done. Add in there Singe awakening the beast that had been, teased for us in multiple episodes. We get an epic action showdown and an epic, what is this creature going to look like? What is this going to happen? And the realization at the end that this is likely Vander when he just spares, Jinx her life by calling her Powder. Such a top-tier great moment. The animation here is great. If anything is a negative about this episode, it's the fact that we kind of got a music video montage at the start, basically blowing over what was Caitlin and Mbessa's arc in the third act. We kind of sped through what they did, and I don't think we did a great job learning what's going on with Kate and Mbessa as much as I would have liked. Definitely Act 2's biggest, weakest thing is Kate and Mbessa's writing overall. Obviously, we see Maddie is in bed there with Kate, and you get some subtle warnings that pay off in episode 9, per se, but again, that side stuff I thought could have been written a lot better, needed more time, maybe not as much rushed, but overall, Paint the Town Blue is just Jinx's show, Jinx's episode, and the episode introduction of Vander Warwick, whatever you want to call this creature, I just thought was very well done. The action was well done. And seeing Mbessa kind of face something that she can't just muscle aside was just an interesting character moment for her. But again, The Ambessa Caitlyn stuff is what keeps this only at number 10 for me, but the Jinx side of stuff was outstanding, and the introduction of Vander here and Warwick here I thought was also outstanding to end the episode. Chef's kiss. Wish we could have went further with Jinx being kind of the figurehead of the Undercity, but I get it. We had to rush to the end of this series, so had to throw away some stuff that was really cool working on. Number 9, Welcome to the Playground. Granted, this episode compared to the rest might not feel as good, but this is the episode that set the tone for the entire show. This is the episode that allowed people to say, I'll check out episode 2 or episode 3, or I didn't like that much, I'm checking out. Welcome to the Playground introduced this whole world, this whole set of characters to everybody in terms of the bottom side stuff, and really drew yourself in, whether it was seeing the last drop for the first time, whether it was that amazing opening scene with young Violet and young Powder, no speech being said as they're introduced to Vander again. I wish, knowing again that they're scared of Vander per se, I wish we kept that Vander did not really know who these children were and who their mother was beforehand. We had to ruin that with Blisters and Bedrock, but that doesn't change how impressive and how great the opening scene of Arcane is. And the whole introduction of the Undercity, Vander is this big emotional character at the beginning, just works very well. You get the sense of Powder, you get the sense of Violet, you have that big fight with all of the young kids after their heist. You have just, Powder's insecurities, Violet there to support her sister, Milo and Clagger kind of being there, your introduction to Echo, Benzo, the sheriff of the Piltover at that time, Marcus. This episode lays so much groundwork and gives you so much interest into a show. It actually works very well as a pilot, and it's the reason why I have it ranked so high is because if this episode wasn't that good, if it was more of a 17 or 18, I think people would have checked out. And after seeing how some of the episodes of Season 2 were, it makes me appreciate and rank this a lot higher than I originally did in Season 1, much like the Episode 2 I had that ranked at number 11. Number 8, finally got the name right, Season 2, Episode 3. This one, for me, is just a really well done episode. The finales for Arcane have always seemingly delivered outside of, I felt like, the series finale episode, but even that's still delivered on a sense. But you finally getting the name right really gave us a great battle between Vi, Jinx. You had Caitlyn and Savik working there. Great visuals per se. Ending with Isha putting the gun to Vi's face, trying to protect Jinx and really allowing Jinx to hit this emotional new pillar per se and caring about this new individual works so well. Seeing Caitlyn being upset with Vi and her descent into being able to be given the keys to Piltover as martial law, as Ambessa manipulates the world to work that way, again, I thought was expertly done. The ending scene where Ambessa is getting Caitlyn to take a stand here, again, jaw-dropping, amazing moment. Wish they followed up on that better throughout the whole Season 2, but that doesn't stop the highlight here of the season at all. You have the Jace, Echo, and Heimerdinger storyline getting sucked into this anomaly, going into their journeys that we'll talk about here later. I thought that worked very well. I think Jace being besides Echo in their conversations, great witty dialogue, great communication. I loved it. If there's anything I'm going to knock a little bit this episode, I felt like we're speedrunning a little bit of the Black Rose. You get the great introduction to whatever this Black Rose is, with Ambessa being attacked by Amara, but then I do think we went a little bit too far having them take Mel out of nowhere, leaving Mel without, being completely gone. I felt like that was like should have been like an episode or two more down the line before they do that again. Maybe get a little bit more information on what the Black Rose might be before we have such a significant, presence of them. But outside of that, this episode, just you finally got the name right, just works incredibly well. It's great visuals. The fight, the music in this episode is tremendous. This is Arcane on its highs, and from here on out, all of these episodes I just think are really, really good episodes of great TV, and that is why finally got the name right is my 8th ranked episode in the series of Arcane. Number 7 is Happy Progress Day. This episode also works for me because it's the introduction of the time jump. I think it does such a great job showing us who Caitlin is as a brand new kind of character. She's out of her background kid character formation into a major player. We're seeing the motivations and what Silco's doing and how he's trying to, keep control of the Undercity, but also try to make it into a better, more prosperous place. Obviously, using Shimmer as an economic, drug on the streets isn't great, but I thought that was very well highlighted. The opening action scene between the firelights and the introduction of Jinx, who has turned from powder, superbly well done. If any knocks on the episode, it's having the fake Vi death. I do think that wasn't fully needed. I get why they did it, and I get why it kind of turns, Jinx into questioning, things a little bit better. But I do think it throws some people off a little bit too much when they're watching the episode. But this is one, again, not knowing that Echo is the main Firelight person just adds more to Happy Progress Day. You see Jace getting manipulated his way onto the council and fighting between this wanting to force through progress because others are wanting it and, being safe around it like Heimerdinger was trying to have him do. You're seeing the signs of, Jace and Victor splitting a little bit. This episode just works almost on all levels for me, from beginning to the end. Outside of the fake Vi death, I think Happy Progress Day was a great reintroduction into the story of Arcane, especially after the time skip and seeing that Vi was in the jail cell. All of that at the end was a perfect reveal of what happened to her. It's this episode is just like a big chef kiss of really capitalizing on a very good time skip and writing everybody in their character moments into really good spots. Number 6, When the Walls Come Crashing Down, Season 1, Episode 6. This visually is one of the best visual episodes with Jinx lighting the lantern. You have Vi and Kate really getting to know each other at a better level, building off of the very basic, structure that we got in Episode 5. You have Silco making a big play and manipulating Marcus to, turn topside, into his own weapon, which I thought was just very well done. You had Powder realizing that, hey, my sister's alive. Can we work together? Can we get back together? And their whole interaction scene together, I think, worked very, very well. Silco confronting Vi. Again, this is a perfect example of we didn't need that flashback to show that Silco and Vander were great friends with Violet and Powder's mother, because it doesn't make sense for him to try and be disposing of Vi, knowing how important that was to somebody he was close with and probably had a loving relationship with in said flashback in terms of like a loving friendship with them. So this episode just works on so many levels. It has a great musical scene, great visual scene. You really get, the backstory of Victor and what starts him down the road to where eventually he becomes the final boss with his cycle of evolution and progress. As he meets up with the Doctor, we see him kind of fighting his disability and wanting to be saved. It just overall works from beginning to end. That the Heimerdinger being ousted, the animated face on Heimerdinger worked really well. I just think that this episode is one that is so underrated because it manages to hold all of the plot lines, all of the characters, give them all meaningful dialogue, all in the episode, and deliver, multiple action scenes in there, including the end one with against the Firelights versus Jinx and Vi. all just worked so well. The character moments and the character writings were there, and it really made for a great episode. And I'm sad that this is just outside my top 5, but there were some episodes in season 2 that were outstanding, and it beat it out, but this is a very, very strong number 6. Number 5, The Message Within the Pattern. This is season 2, episode 6, and this was by far one of the best, top 2 episode of season 2, top 5 episode of Arcane, the full series, bringing together of what Jace was doing, partially of where Jace was going, figuring out everything Victor is working on, positive and maybe with the negative red flags. You're getting, Singed and Bessa and Caitlyn converging. You have Vi there trying to heal Vander with Isha and Jinx. So much about this episode is working because we're getting a lot of great character moments. We're getting a lot of great character dialogue. We're really fleshing out through Victor where Vander is inside of this. You have so much being worked on, so much being done, all while knowing it's all going to come apart during this episode. You know that Jace is on his way, likely to kill Victor or try to do something about Victor. You see this paradise, but there's something about it that should read like this. This doesn't feel right. Something's wrong about this. You have the doctor telling Victor of hey, your power is limited. Let me help you, evolve. And Victor, at this point, being more I can't do that. I'm not giving into that side. That's not that's not good for me. You have an amazing action scene towards the end. You have emotional heartbeats throughout. You have Vi and Caitlyn coming back together. Maybe a little bit too quick. But I bought that as Caitlyn now is moving against Mbessa in this relationship. You have Mbessa being caught there by Vi, and what was a very fun moment with a little bit fun flashback. Then you have probably the most impactful death of the whole entire second season of Arcane, and that's Issa's sacrifice. And just the emotional moment, I saw this coming a mile away. It didn't cause me to give tears like other people, but it definitely hit me like a roller coaster. And seeing, Jinx lose somebody that was her emotional pillar, her, her stable block per se, was just so well done. And the visuals of that scene, the visuals of that shot, the music of that shot, again, worked so well. This is another episode that didn't feature a music video. It really showed us the connection Victor and Sky had in this cosmic type world that Victor is now in control of, with the hex core at his heart. Nothing but amazing things that we talked about with this episode, the message within the pattern, and gave me a lot of hope that this series would end well. And maybe it didn't reach the highs of this episode, but this episode cannot be ignored for its greatness overall, and one of the best episodes of Arcane, top 5, number 5 for me. Number 4, it's Pretend Like It's the First Time. Season 2, Episode 7. Parallel universe might not have fit in the overall story, I feel, in the final act per se. I felt that, we didn't have time to go this type of a way for the whole entire series to end how I would like. But when you take this episode in its own, when you look at everything it accomplishes in its own, this is a masterpiece. This is season 2's masterpiece of an episode, where we're seeing 2 different timelines. We're seeing the timeline of what happens if Vi dies in the explosion of the first heist in season 1, episode 1. As well as what happens if Victor wins at the end of the in season 2, episode 9. And the journey Jace is on is just horrific, and there's so much horrifying visuals. It looks like the aftermath of, say, a nuclear type weapon. You mix that with the alternate, more positive world that Echo and Heimerdinger experience, and Echo's relationship with a powder that is very positive, that is very, not emotionally stable, is a light to all of those around her. You see Vander still alive here. You see Benzo still alive here. You see Milo and Clagger still alive here. And, Echo having to deal with, him being jumpy at the sign of Jinx even though Powder's not Jinx. The emotional relationship that he builds, and he sees that there is a positive side of his Jinx through this alternate version Powder. The relationship they build with each other is so well done. The journey Jace goes on with is so well done. The maybe sacrifice Heimerdinger made, again, was great. That Powder seeing our Echo, and his Z drive and his teleportation back from the anomaly. So well done. I just think this episode is a masterpiece because it really gives you out storytelling. It really allows you to learn Echo more. And Echo is the most underutilized character of the whole entire series. One of the best characters of the whole entire series, but underutilized, underfeatured. And, given how important he was at the end, he should have been given more time, and the Firelight should have been given more time, in my opinion. But it's just a beautiful episode, a lot of beautiful moments, great chemistry between Echo and Powder here. You see the hope that is inside of Jinx that you can even find in the current one, and just showing how things might go differently. Now, some issues I have maybe a little bit with it is Silco was already in this season, in the timeline where Vi had taken the heist and stuff, he was already in the process of making Shimmer and planning a takeover and using Shimmer to take over the Undercity. So, again, a lot of Arcane having their own cake and eating it too, but I will not ignore all the other fantastic elements of, pretend like it's the first time. Now, we move into our top 3, and all 3 episodes are episodes from Season 1, because I think these are the standout 10 out of 10 perfect episodes. I got no complaints about them. We're starting off with number 3, The Boy Savior. Right? We were just talking about Echo a second ago. And here we are again. The reintroduction to Echo, adult Echo here, was so well done. The Firelights were somebody you had so many questions about. Who is this Undercity street gang? And you see that they are the light of hope. That Echo is the one here who is allowing the Undercity to have hope. The heart that he's putting into so many individuals, so many people, to give them light, to give them, a place to safety, to be a positive force. So well done. Jinx dealing with losing her sister again, kind of going a little bit off the deep side. So well done. You have Jace struggling with Mel and, kind of figuring out what he needs to do as a counselor, per se, now that he's kind of head of the council. Victor, going all in on his Hex Core and Shimmer, diagnosis, being told by Mel, hey, we should maybe make Hex Tech weapons. And again, more of Jason and Victor going off separate paths here. So well done. And we're not even talking about the best part about this episode, which is the confrontation showdown between Caitlyn, Vi, Echo, and Jinx. The bridge scene is 10 out of 10, one of the best scenes and best moments of TV of the last decade. Whether it's the head-on action, the head-on scene that we got there, whether it is the just confrontation that we have of all the artwork of the demons and Jinx's head taking place. Again, I don't know where those demons went in season 2, but, different Jinx, different season. Just so well done. And I just think that The Boy Savior gave us one of the best characters of Arcane Echo, and gave us so much more of a side of Caitlyn and understanding of Caitlyn and fleshing out of her character more in there. Had a great action art scene. You learned a lot more about Jinx. You learned a lot more about Silco and the Chem Barons, per se. There's just so much going on in Arcane Episode 1, Season 7, The Boy Savior, that just works and is absolutely phenomenal. That it's my number 3, and I can't, again, the only thing I can think of as a criticism, and it really isn't a part of the episode, which is why I have it number 3, maybe it doesn't go up higher as number 2 or number 1, is the goddamn music video to start before we get into the reintroduction of Echo. And I'm just like, I feel like they heard everybody loved The Boy Savior in Season 1, and we're like, oh, they like the animated music videos. What if we do that in every episode possible in Season 2? And somebody should have been there to smack them on the head and say, stop it. No. But, yeah, The Boy Savior, number 3. Outstanding episode. One of the ones you watch and you just jaw drops and you can't wait to get into the next episode. You can't wait to learn more, especially about Echo. You're so invested in Echo. Does he live? Does he not? And you hope he's so surviving, and it's so happy when he does, because he is such a good character, and so much of the reason why he's a great character is because he's so well written in The Boy Savior. And again, he should have been used a lot more throughout the series, but we had the rush different ends, and he got kind of left behind or left in a parallel universe where I guess episode 7 is just the Echo episode. Number 2, season 1, episode 9, The Monster You Created. The first season finale was just so well done putting things together. You really got some amazing lines and Jason Victor coming together, just, figuring out that they pushed science too far and they really need to destroy the things they need to destroy, whether it be the Hex Core, whether it's Jace getting rid of his hammer. All of that changes because of what happens at the end of the season. Great bars being written there. You have the amazing confrontation at the very end with Jinx, with Vi, with Silco, even with Caitlyn there. And Jinx and Vi just having the communication on each other one after another. The whole entire, what do you want to call it, like tea party scene was top-notch, great cinema, great character moments. It really showed you that Vi did not understand her sister anymore, that she kept wanting Powder to be Powder. She wasn't accepting that she might be something different, and saying like, do things for mom, do things for dad, do things for Milo and Clagger, or basically forcing the demons into her head. And it was so beautifully done at the end of season 1 and highlighting that. You have Jace brokering up with Silco, and Silco kind of saying, you know what? Jinx is my daughter, and I am not going to throw her away just so we can get Zaun. But Jace even realizing, like, hey, we are wrong. We have no right to control the Undercity. They should be their free and independent thing. I thought worked extremely well. The amazing musical finale with Sting, again, worked so well, and the rocket into the council room, that cliffhanger, worked incredibly well. The conversations between Mel and her mother, and why did she why did she send her the Piltover, again, worked so well. I wish, again, some of the season 2 didn't try to retcon that in different ways, with Mel being a quote-unquote weapon. I do think Mbessa cared very much for Mel as her daughter, and I do think Mbessa feels like Mel weakened her in different ways because of how humane and positive Mel is as an individual. But I just love this episode from top to bottom. There's really no complaints. Maybe a little bit speedrunning, but I think it's top-tier TV, top-tier finale. And for most TV shows, they wish they could have a number 1 spot as good as The Monster You Created. But unfortunately, for Arcane, it's at number 2. Because the number 1 episode for me, my top episode of Arcane, is The Base Violence Necessary for Change, Season 1, Episode 3. Why is this my top-ranked episode? When I go back and watch, when I talk to anybody who's watched this show that might not have been a League of Legends fan, the number 1 thing they tell me is, man, Episode 3, that hooked me. That was so goddamn good. That was, like, breathtakingly amazing. I could not believe everything that happened that episode. I could not understand how we had something that felt like a serious finale in episode 3 and yet not feel like it was rushed or done, poorly. You got so much built up with Silco. You have the whole, relationship and change of relationship between Violet and Powder. You have Jason Victor working together and discovering how to utilize Hex Tech with runes. You have Mel kind of nudging them along. You have, this Shimmer monster that right off the bat kills 2 people who were very popular and very good voices in the first couple episodes of Arcane, and Benzo and the Sheriff. You have, just great visuals. The opening monologue with Silco Mwah. Beautiful way to open an episode. The score in this episode is fantastic. The whole entire scene with Vi fighting off all the thugs with the iron gauntlets on, so well done. Powder trying to go in and unfortunately causing damage to everybody. Again, so well done. The loss that you had there felt real. It felt groundbreaking. You really felt all the positive momentums. The ending scene with Violet and Powder and the work done by the voice actress of young Powder, so superbly done. Everything just comes together. Everything just works together. It is breathtaking. It is engaging. You feel as if this is a world that is not afraid to just be real. Is not afraid to just be like, hey, these characters, they could die. And it is the number one episode that I think hooks people in. It's the number one episode that sets the tone for the rest of the series of Arcane. It's the episode that takes you from, this is a good TV show, that this is going to be an amazing TV show. This is much-watched TV. And it's because this episode is just so well done, from the opening monologue to the ending song going away as you see Powder accept into the arms of Silco and the flames fade away. This episode, the base violence necessary for change, is unequivocally a masterpiece. It is one of the best, if not the best episode, in my opinion, of TV in the 2020 decade so far. And it is the one that made Arcane into the phenomenon it was. Because if this episode wasn't as good as it was, people might have checked out after 3 episodes. But this episode was the best episode of the series that, happened right at the beginning, that got everybody in their seats, whether it be watching episode 4 or coming back in a week's time being like, I need to see the follow-up to that, because that was just jaw-dropping stunningness. And even when on rewatches, it just works so well top to bottom. It is a pristine top 100 all-time TV episode for me. The base violence necessary for change is my top-ranked episode of Arcane in the series. But tell me in the comments, what is your top episode of Arcane? And what did I get right? What did I get wrong? This is a longer video because Arcane's a great show and something I love talking about. Now, I will be doing my how I would fix Arcane up here in the next couple weeks, trying to figure out exactly how I want to edit and film that. But it's been a blast here. And again, tell me what your top 5 episodes are in the comments, and tell me what I got right and wrong. And anybody who watched as long as this is, I thank you, and I can't wait to see you in other comments and other form of videos I do, whether it's League of Legends and Arcane related, or it's other related with things like, reality TV like Survivor, Pittsburgh Steelers, sports stuff, or even just my basic movie reviews that I do here on the channel. But I will see you all around, and I wish you all a happy holidays, or if you see this later on, I wish you all just a good day.